16 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. There was a road. John did not take it. He tore diagonally across the cornfield, tearing through broken corn stalks toward the mass of angry humanity at the Highway 131 barricade. The spacemen were winning. There were a lot of them, and they had taken cover behind their vehicles, rattling gunfire into the crowd. We rolled to a stop just short of the mayhem. I heard a stray bullet ping off the grill of the truck. To me, Falconer said, "Watch this." He told John, "You see that button there, marked loudspeaker? Punch that. Turn that volume knob all the way to the right." John did. Falconer pulled the little black box from his pocket. "Open the mic. Click the... yeah, hold it there." Falconer reached up toward the mic mounted on the console and pressed a button on his little gadget. I could almost hear the noise the little gadget made. In the cab of the monster truck, it felt more like an irritating vibration, like if you pulled a long strip of crinkled aluminum foil between your teeth. I saw Amy wince. But the effect on the spacemen was immediate. They flinched or fell to a knee or dropped their guns. Some collapsed entirely. The longer the tone played, the more debilitating the effects. Several of them turned their guns on the truck and opened fire, bullets plinking off the armor and leaving white bird shit-like pockmarks in the bulletproof windshield. Then the spacemen charged the truck. One of them climbed to the front bumper, and I realized he had found the loudspeaker on the roof. Others reached the doors and clawed at the handles. I flinched at the sound of something crashing against the window next to me, and saw a spaceman rearing back for another blow on the glass with the butt of his rifle. He slammed it again and made a crack. Amy ducked. Meanwhile, the guy on the hood was going after the loudspeaker, smacking it with the butt of his own rifle. But none of the men had a fraction of their usual strength. Falconer kept his thumb on the death buzzer, and the spaceman collapsed onto the hood, landing right in front of the windshield, his faceplate shattering with the impact. Amy gasped. Two open, dead eyes looked back at us. The eyes were different colors, one brown, one blue. The rest of the face was gone. What was left was a skull, held together with pink tendons and ribbons of fraying, decaying muscle. Running all through the skull, twitching between the gaps in bone and sinew, were ropes of something that looked like spaghetti, twisting and pulling and, I was sure, reaching down through the ruined body of the former man inside, operating him like a puppet. The spaceman outside my door had also collapsed. The ground around the truck was now littered with them. Falconer let off the buzzer. The battle had gone silent. The mob on the other side of the barricade was frozen, baffled by what they were seeing. They weren't even celebrating. Even if it meant winning the battle, this was a group of people who absolutely did not feel like seeing any more weird bullshit today. Amy opened her door and yelled to them, "We're the good guys, don't shoot!" John said, "Look, what the hell?" Something was going on with the face of the dead spaceman on the hood of the truck. One of his eyes was twitching. Then the eye started pushing forward out of his skull, oozing out like a snake. The other eye did the same. Amy said, What? What is it?" Out of the spaceman's dead skull crawled two spiders, each as thick as a bratwurst, each covered in tiny legs, each ending in a single, lidless human eye. From outside the truck, I heard glass breaking. Faceplates on dead spacemen were cracking and bursting open. Out from each crawled a pair of the eye spiders. "Oh, fuck, Tenet, tell them to bomb this right here, now. Shit." The spiders raced through the grass towards us, and there was Amy looking right at them out of her open door because she couldn't see them. I lunged across her and pulled her door closed right as one of the spiders leaped, wedging itself into the gap at the last second before I could get it all the way closed. Amy screamed because now she could see it, now that the thing was writhing in the gap of the partially closed door a foot away from her face. Its legs were thrashing as it frantically tried to press its way inside, the single human eye twitching, looking all around the cabin of the truck. The hoodman's eye spiders had crawled onto the windshield. Others had joined them, the skittering parasites hopping onto the truck, running across the hood and windows. Soon, a dozen disembodied human eyes were staring in at us, hungrily looking for new skulls to occupy. They skittered over to Amy's door, toward the few inches of gap the first spider was holding open with its body. They crowded around and started forcing their way in, a mass of disembodied eyeballs on black parasite bodies. I pulled with all my strength, trying to crush the little bastards, but they were too well armored, and I wasn't strong enough. One finally pushed its way in, flipping onto Amy's lap. She shrieked. Another followed it. Then it was a torrent of the squirming creatures pouring into the cab of the truck. One leapt at John's face. He caught it, cursing. Falconer, who couldn't see the invaders but who could easily guess what was happening, yelled, "Open the mic! Open the mic again!" John, fighting with the parasite, trying to burrow into his face with one hand, found the loudspeaker button with the other. Falconer pressed the button on his gadget. The hum filled the air. The spiders shrieked. One by one, they exploded, splattering the interior in a spray of yellow goo. Finally, the pained shrieks died, and all that was left was the soft drumming of the rain. I wiped eyeball spider guts off my face. John said, "Seriously? Just right here. All the bombs. Right here in this spot. We'll wait." I said, "I agree." Amy was too traumatized to say anything at all. But to John, Falconer said, "We're running out of time. Drive." He did. 12 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. John rolled over bodies of spacemen, going out of his way to do it, it seemed, and rolled past the carnage of the pitched battle that had been raging just minutes ago. He knocked aside Reaper vehicles and pushed through the damaged barricades on the highway. The mob in front of us fell silent, parting as we rolled slowly into town, into the blast zone of the bombs that even now were riding in the bellies of planes just over the horizon. "That's far enough." John stopped, and Falconer yanked Tenet out of the truck. He reached back into the cab and grabbed the mic for its radio, and pulled it as far as the little coiled wire would let it. Falconer put his gun to Tenet's head and said, "All right, shitbird, this is ground zero. They drop those bombs, you get flash fried just like the rest of us. Now, get on this radio and tell them to abort." Tenet looked at him with genuine disdain. "What you are threatening me with is the best case scenario if I fail my task. How are you failing to understand this?" A huge, blue, extended cab pickup truck emerged from the crowd in front of us. It had a wood chipper in the bed, and out from the driver's seat stepped a guy in cowboy hat and absurdly tight pants. From the passenger seat emerged Owen, still in his quarantine-issued red jumpsuit. The cowboy had a shotgun. Owen had his pistol. They looked like the stars of an 80s-era show about loose cannon undercover cops, called something like O-Funk and the Cowboy. From the back seat of the pickup stepped Dr. Marconi. I tried to imagine the conversation the three of them had on the way over, and my brain just spat out error messages. To me, Marconi said, "I managed to convince them that, despite their differences, they also have a great deal in common." The cowboy hurried over to Falconer and said, "Holy shit, you got the son of a bitch. I owe you a 12-pack, detective." "It's not over yet. The bombs are coming and this asshole won't call them off." Owen spoke up and said, "Why don't we start feeding his feet into the fucking wood chipper, see if that changes his mind?" Tennant said, all right. Give me the mic." Falconer handed it to him. Tennant yanked, ripping the wire out of the console, and tossed the mic onto the ground. Falconer growled, smashed the butt of his gun into Tennant's face, and threw him to the ground. Falconer followed him down, straddling his chest, punching him over and over. I said, "Should we, stop him?" John said, "Nope." 9 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. Marconi walked up and said, "Why do I have the feeling I am not going to receive my consultant's fee for this project?" I said, "Everybody is so freaking droll today. Jesus." John said, "Well, what the hell do we do now?" To Amy, Marconi said, "You have one of those fancy cell phones, correct? One that can capture video?" She said, "Yep," and pulled it out. "You have signal, correct? Access to the internet?" Sure. Somebody in the crowd said, "Look, there's a plane to the north. They're coming." I turned. There was a speck in the sky that even from this far away, I could tell was not our friendly Predator drone coming back to rescue us somehow. Not sure what it would have done anyway. This was a big bastard with propellers on the wings. One of the big cargo planes you always saw in the news hauling troops back and forth to the Middle East. Marconi asked, "And you can stream video, meaning you can capture video and upload it live?" "Yeah. What am I recording?" Marconi sighed and said, "Our deaths." 8 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. I said, "What? That's your plan?" He stuffed his hands in his pockets and gave me a sad look through the rain. "What's that around your lady friend's neck?" I didn't have to look at her to answer. It was always there. "What, her necklace?" "The crucifix." "Think about it. What I said before, back at quarantine. The Babylonian Bureau. Yes. God damn it, we don't have time. The sacrifice, David. This is how mankind overcomes the Babel threshold. Our little tribal circles bound by social contracts and selfish mutual need. Everyone working in their own greedy self-defenses and huddling together with their tribe, at war with all those outside who they regard as barely human. What breaks a human mind out of that iron cage of mistrust is sacrifice. The martyr who gives up everything, who abandons all personal gain, who lays down his very life for the good of those outside his group. He becomes a symbol all can rally around. So instead of trying to make a selfish, violent primate somehow empathize with the whole world, which is impossible, you only need to get him to remember and love the martyr. As one is forgotten, another must replace it. Unfortunately, as I feared, today, that is to be us." The plane grew on the horizon. 2 more appeared in the distance behind it. I could hear the ever-so-faint buzz of its engines. Appropriately enough, they sounded like bees, just like Tennant had said. A swarm of bees attacking a hamburger, I guess. Amy was staring at me, eyes wide. Owen and Cowboy looked befuddled. Falconer was standing over an unconscious Tennant, his fists bloody, eyes defiant. 7 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. John said, "Fuck that bullshit. Everybody in the truck, we're heading out." Marconi said, "So we ride to safety while the tens of thousands who remain in the city behind us burn. And then what? We drive out across the buffer zone outside those barricades, and a few miles later you will meet another, larger barricade, manned by the U.S. military. Martyrdom isn't something you choose. It is thrust upon you." Amy said, "Oh, wait. Oh my God, it's so simple. We just have to get to an open area between us and the plane so he sees it. The cornfield. Everybody go to the cornfield." To John, she said, "Get on the speaker thing in the truck. Tell everybody to go to the cornfield." We didn't need to tell anybody anything. Hundreds of people were flowing past us through the ruined barricades, the city draining out through the highway like water. We piled into the truck, managed to get it turned around without running over a dozen people, and rumbled off toward the cornfield. On the way, Amy said, "The plane. Oh, God, I can't believe I didn't think of this. It's flying low under the clouds. We can see it, so it can see us." I don't understand how that... The pilot thinks we're zombies. We just have to show him we're not. 5 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We rumbled to a stop in the field. Refugees of Undisclosed scattering past us, on foot and in trucks and on bicycles, heading off toward the second military cordon that I'm pretty sure most of them didn't realize was there. What did they think they would find out there? Their out-of-town loved ones waiting for them with a six-pack? The president with an apology bouquet? John took to the loudspeaker and said, "We got about 5 minutes to pull this shit off, so listen up. Gather around. We are going to spell out a message for the pilot of that plane up there. He doesn't know what he's about to bomb. We are going to show his dumb ass." We all bailed out of the truck, the pickup carrying Owen, the cowboy, and Marconi, which upon further reflection is totally a cop show I would watch, pulled alongside. I glanced nervously up at the plane and said, "Son of a bitch, we don't have time. We don't have time." John said, "It has to be something simple, like help or something. We don't have time to form 4 fucking letters, John." Marconi said, "You don't need letters, David. You need a symbol. One that man up there is sure to recognize." Marconi nodded toward Amy. John said, "Right, he's right." John ran off, stopped a group of women and said, "Stand in a line right here. Hurry, you, over there. Stand here. Come on, God damn it, we need at least 100 people. Move." Transcript of an exchange between Captain Pablo Vasquez, Spearhead, pilot of an MC-130H Talon II, lead aircraft in Operation Leopard, and co-pilot Captain Lawrence McDonnell, Stallion, at 11:59, November 15th. Spearhead. Loadmaster, we are 60 seconds from primary payload release. Prepare to open bay doors on my mark. Stallion. Hey, take a look at the barricade area on the road, the highway. Spearhead. I see it. Stallion. We have a crowd forming. Are those Reaper? Spearhead. Negative. Stallion. Friendly's evac should have been completed by... Spearhead. Negative. Those are not Reaper. Stallion. Jesus, are we looking at Zulus here? Spearhead. Affirmative. I'm seeing overturned vehicles and debris. It looks like the barricade has been overrun. Spearhead. Will the blast get them out there? Spearhead. Affirmative. Loadmaster, we are now 30 seconds away from primary payload release. Opening bay doors now. Stallion. Look, down at that area to the east of the highway in that field. Spearhead. Copy that. There's a crowd forming in the field. Stallion. Look how they're standing. Spearhead. Is that? Stallion. Look at the rows. They're perfect rows. Spearhead. They're almost forming the shape of... Stallion. It's not almost, it's perfect. It's too perfect a shape. Spearhead. All right, this is, Command, this is Spearhead. Do you read me? I don't believe what I'm seeing here, but we're observing a crowd of Zulus less than a kilometer outside of the target area, and they're standing in the shape of a human penis. I repeat, the Zulus have organized themselves into a perfect shape of a human penis in an open field below us. We're looking at this with our own eyes. Stallion. They are not Zulus. 30 seconds until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We stood there in the field, shivering in the rain, in the shape of the dick John had formed us into. Dr. Marconi was to one side of me, looking disapproving. Amy was in my arms, her eyes turned upward, rain bouncing off her glasses. She was praying. The cargo plane growled toward us, swooping lower, so low that I wondered how the thing expected to escape its own explosion. Amy closed her eyes and buried her face in my chest and said, "I love you. I love you too." It's turning. Look. The hulking plane banked, making a gentle turn in the sky and veering away from the town. We nervously watched it humming off into the distance, making a wide circle to head back the way it came. A cheer went up in the crowd around us. There were 5 planes in the formation, and we watched as one after another they peeled off and circled back. Falconer walked up and said, "I just want to say right now that this is the stupidest shit I've ever been involved in." John said, "Hey, you don't have to like our methods, but you can't argue with the result. Everything turned out okay, right?" 10 seconds until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. Amy said, "Why isn't that plane turning back?" The trailing plane in the formation was not, in fact, changing its course. It growled straight through the air, swooping right over us. The crowd all watched it glide into the distance, heading toward the part of town that had become home to the quarantine. The plane swooped lower and lower in the sky, as if it was going to attempt a landing. Only it was not slowing down, it was speeding up. It released its payload, following the bombs down until both bombs and plane met the earth. A silent black plume instantly appeared in the distance, the boom reaching us 2 full seconds later. The detonation would be heard 2 states away. We were too far away to realize it at the time, but both buildings of the old Firth Asylum had been reduced to a crater full of thousands of tons of scattered concrete and brick. All of it was cooking in a furnace fueled by aviation fuel, floorboards, old furniture, and tons of other flammable debris that would still be smoldering 10 days later. Somewhere, at the bottom of it all, rooms full of malformed inmates were vaporized in a fraction of a second. In the old administrative building next door, a single basement room full of computers and gigabytes of incriminating data on hard drives, all melted into a bubbling black stew. The soy sauce redux. John said, Now there's a shitty bomber pilot. The rain was starting to let up. I took a deep breath of morning air and said, "The town is still there, Tenet. You played your hand, and you lost." "Wait, where is he?" Falconer said, "Oh, son of a bitch." The blue pickup, which Tenet had apparently stolen while we were all standing in the shape of a dong and waiting to die, was barreling north up the highway. I said, "Who cares? He's going to run smack into the Army's cordon. Hopefully they'll arrest his stupid ass." But Falconer was already sprinting toward the monster truck. He was damned if he was going to let somebody else get his collar after all this. I was about to bid him good hunting when John brushed past me and jumped into the passenger seat. And then Amy was running toward the truck, and I realized that nobody else was going to be happy until they saw a proper end to this. I ran and jumped into the back seat, my shoe dragging on pavement as the truck almost took off without me. The sight of Amy's airtight cordon operation instantly ruined every zombie movie for me. These people weren't stupid. Strategy was their thing. They assessed the enemy and adjusted their plan accordingly. If it was zombies, so be it. Thus, there was not a single soldier visible, not a single exposed face or neck available to be bitten and zombified. Instead, there was a row of armored vehicles full of soldiers, Bradley fighting vehicles, I would later learn, arranged in a formation that would give them clear shots from their gun ports and from the turrets mounted at the top of each vehicle. They sat well back from concrete barricades that would stop any suicide vehicles in their tracks. Coils of razor wire were strung along the ground on both sides of the barrier. A horde of 5,000 zombies, even fast zombies, could rush the formation, and they would be easily blown to pieces by a crisscross hail of large-caliber rounds. These men were told that they were staring into the ravenous maw of a zombie outbreak, and they were prepared to mow that shit down like dead grass. After having followed him the 5 miles across the dead zone, we thought Tenet's truck was just going to keep going and plow right into the green wall of death, at which point I assumed he would find his weight in lead rushing through his windshield at the speed of sound. Was this a suicide by armored vehicle? For what? Just to spite Falconer? God damn, this guy was a dick. Instead, Tenet's truck skidded to a stop short of the barbed wire. We stopped behind him, watching. Tenet jumped out and walked toward the soldiers, waving his arms in the air. It wasn't like he was signaling surrender. It was more like he was waving them away, screaming and pointing and acting like a crazy person. Then he was tackled and ripped to pieces by a monster in a black spacesuit. I said, "Well, that worked out." We all watched Tenet's well-deserved and awesomely ironic death when we heard the first thud of heavy machine guns erupt from the lines of vehicles ahead. To our right, descending down from the water tower construction site, was a nightmare horde of shambling, malformed, infected Reaper personnel. They crawled and howled and shrieked and sprouted snapping appendages. Then it hit me that this was, in fact, Tenet's dying plan. Tenet had thrown his personal horde of infected at the Army cordon, giving them their zombie apocalypse, and every reason in the world to unleash hell on the city beyond, regardless of what one airplane pilot claimed he saw. I yelled, "Get us out of here!" The infected were washing in from our right, swarming toward us in the line of armored vehicles in front of us. More and more of the vehicles were going weapons-free on the horde, the turrets and machine guns punching fire and lead into the air. Falconer was already throwing the monster truck into reverse, cranking the wheel and getting us perpendicular to the highway, then cranking it the other way to get the big bastard of a vehicle heading the other direction. The roar of the big guns outside was like the finale of a fireworks display. I couldn't hear myself think. The truck shook. Amy screamed. Something had hit us. Falconer growled and fought with the wheel. We weren't moving. I smelled smoke. Another shell smacked the front of the truck, knocking the hood askew. Flames flew up in front of the windshield. Get out and get flat. Falconer threw open his door and ducked out. John was messing with something in his lap. The fur gun had fallen to the floorboard. I grabbed it, then climbed over Amy and threw open the door. The sound of monster shrieks and cannon fire filled the air. My shoes hit the pavement, and I heard Falconer yell, "The ditch! Get to the ditch!" I saw where he was going, the deep drainage ditch along the west side of the road, no more than 10 feet in front of us. John spilled out behind me, all of us now using the burning truck as cover against the barrage of gunfire. Falconer sprinted forward, making himself as low to the ground as he could, and dove into the ditch. Amy yelled, "John!" John wheeled around to see a big infected fucker loping toward him from behind, dragging the tattered remains of a black spacesuit. I fumbled with the fur gun, but before I could even get it sitting properly in my hand, John hit the, let's just call it a zombie, with 3 barrels of shotgun. Suddenly, the monster was missing everything from the neck up. To Amy, I yelled, "Stay low as you can, go!" We ran from behind the truck and tumbled down into the drainage ditch. Bullets punched the dirt and pavement overhead. The truck exploded, sending flaming debris whirling through the air above us. It was the second time I'd almost been hit by a flaming truck part in the last half hour. A new personal record. Amy yelled, "They're gonna kill us!" I said, "Down, get your head down!" A spray of bullets raked across the water behind us, punching into the mud of the embankment. She yelled, "We have to stop them!" John was frantically trying to pull something out of his pocket. Shotgun shells, I assumed. Something whistled past my ear. Next to me, Falconer tumbled into the shallow water of the ditch. The stream under him ran red. "Falconer!" "Amy, no!" I grabbed for her arm. She pulled away from me. She scrambled up the embankment, right into the line of fire. It seemed to happen in slow motion. She stood up, right into the storm of bullets, and started waving her arms in front of her, like she was trying to flag down an oncoming car. She was shouting something at them that not even I could hear over the hellstorm erupting all around her. Time seemed to stop. I had this frozen snapshot image of her standing up there, silhouetted against the iron gray sky, her pants soaking wet and splattered with mud, her skinny freckled arms up in front of her, pulling the tail of her shirt up to reveal 2 inches of pale, vulnerable skin. All these details captured perfectly in my mind in that endless moment. And the moment was, in fact, endless because time had stopped. From behind me, John said, "Finally, Jesus." It was dead silent all around us. The water at my feet had frozen. A spray of bits of mud hung in the air in the embankment above me, where a bullet had struck a microsecond before. I turned to John, who had the soy sauce container in his hand. I said, "What the—" "Oh, Dave, you're here with me. I stopped time. I hope that's okay." You can do that now?" "Yeah, ever since I took the soy sauce last night. I'm like Zach Morris in Saved by the Bell. The only catch is you can't actually accomplish anything while time has stopped. You can move yourself, but it's mostly informational, I guess." I climbed up the embankment, taking in the frozen battle all around me, like some sort of huge, open-air, incredibly fucked up sculpture in a museum. I looked back at Amy, a statue frozen with her mouth open, exposing her crooked incisors. I shrugged and said, "Well, it's actually not the weirdest thing that's happened on the sauce." John walked up behind me and said, "I wouldn't even put it in the top 5. And I know what you're thinking. And no, we can't push her out of the way. Nothing can be moved. And I don't mean that in the sense that they tell you not to change anything when you go back in time, like it's a rule or something. I mean, literally, nothing can be moved. I've tried." I said, "I can move the fur gun." I still had it in my hand. "Right. And you're moving your pants when you walk. I think it's anything you were touching when everything stopped." "How long does it stay like this?" "I don't know. I've only done it once before. I couldn't intentionally make it start up again, but I got the sense that it lasts until you do what you need to do, whether you know what you need to do or not, if that makes any sense." "What do we need to do?" I stared over at the column of smoke frozen over the burning truck, the still flames looking like orange-blown glass sculptures. Then, from the still, black column, a wisp of smoke moved. At that exact moment, I thought it. John said it out loud. "Oh, shit." The shadow men were here. It started with that single black shadow hanging in midair. It was moving toward us. Then I saw another one, and another. They grew out of the air, black shapes like holes burning in the white curtain of reality, revealing the darkness beyond. 3 and 4 at a time they appeared, the darkness taking on the vague shapes of men. Each time my eyes focused on one spot, walking shadows would appear where I wasn't watching. It was like trying to count snowflakes as they landed on a windshield. John and I backed away from them, then realized they were behind us too, on the other side of the ditch. We were an island in a black tide of them. Page 312. Science and the Beyond. Dr. Albert Marconi. And I must emphasize that my encounters with the shadow men have been rare, in the sense that stepping in dog feces is rare. That is, the potential is always there. You never forget it when it happens, but you go just long enough between incidents to let your guard down. Yet, everyone has been in the presence of a shadow man, in the same way that everyone has been in the presence of electricity. It's all around you, invisible, tickling at the periphery of your perceptions. Then, one day, you touch a bare wire. These beings live in between moments and outside of time, across dimensions, and perhaps never fully exist in any particular one. They have been called ghosts, and no doubt they wear the faces of the recently dead and the imagination of a person trying to reconcile what they saw in that dark corridor, or in the silence of their bedroom at 3 a.m. For others, they will perhaps appear to be tiny gray aliens. Centuries ago, a shadow man would have been called a fairy or a succubus. That is how the human brain works. When it looks at a formless cloud, it tries to take shape, or a face, or otherwise associate it with something that makes sense in some known cultural context, like the proverbial image of the Virgin Mary seen in the grain of a tree stump, or a slice of toast. But make no mistake, the observer supplies the face. You have never heard of anyone being harmed or killed by a shadow person, in the sense that you have never met someone who failed to be born. Our unique, limited perception limits us to only see one possible outcome of an event. If we grow tiresome of a tedious conversation with a man, we cannot, say, simply switch to another quantum reality in which that man did not survive a bout of childhood pneumonia, winking him out of our thread of existence like turning the channel on a television. The shadow men can. There are enthusiasts of the paranormal on the internet and elsewhere who point to the tens of thousands of people who go missing worldwide each year and speculate that they have been taken by the shadow men. but I am prone to think that this is misunderstanding their methods. If the shadow men, say, invaded your home and took your wife, you would in that next moment have no recollection of ever having been married. At best, you would have only a terrible gnawing sense of something missing, a hole in your life into which something should perfectly fit, something that should rightfully exist, but does not. One young man I know, who has written about the incident in his own book, claims that he retains distinct memories of a friend who was lost in an encounter with the shadows. The parents of the friend still live in town, yet they do not recall a son. The rental records of his apartment shows no person under that name ever resided there. The records of the public school system retain no mention of a student by that name. The difference between our reality and the reality that this young man remembers could be so close that only molecules separate them. A particular sperm that failed to fertilize a particular egg in one reality, but that was successful in another. Some speculate that we sense the ripples of these changes in the form of déjà vu, or those infuriating occasions when we insist we remember an event or conversation with a group of friends that no one else in the group recollects. You hear of a prominent person passing away and swear that you heard the same news years earlier. But of course, the real power of the shadow men is that we do not perceive them at all. The Bible, Part 2. John and I backed up. I raised the fur gun, stupidly, having no idea what effect it would have on these beings. We retreated slowly, bumping backward against the rigid Amy statue that was still standing there, frozen. Her arms were outstretched, her eyes wide, unwittingly putting herself in an absolutely perfect posture for the situation. The shadow man closest to me was no more than 10 feet away. I had the fur gun on him because I had nothing else. Where there would be eyes on a man, burning coals of yellow and orange flared on the shadow man, like a pair of lit cigars floating in the blackness. And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't just a shadow man, but was the shadow man. The one I had seen in my bathroom. The one that lurked in my cell in the basement of the old asylum. The one that now, in this moment, I sensed was actually never far from me. I could not bring myself to think, "What are you?" Instead, the feeling was more akin to, "It's you again. I have spoken to it before." The blackness closed in on us. No gap between the shadow men now. Their cold intelligence, malice, and cataclysmic lethality advancing as a solid black wave. Like the artist who painted our reality had knocked over an ink bottle on it. We had no room to retreat. Both of us pressed against the Amy monument. "Dave," John hissed. "Dave, shoot. Shoot them. Do something." But my eyes were fixed on the burning coals of the shadow man in front of me, and something was passing between us. There were no words, but we were communicating. The thoughts passed instantly, faster than words could have managed, like files instantly streamed between two computers. If I had to translate what the shadow man told me into words, it would be this. What is a man? What do you think a man is? What do you think we are? What do you think your relationship is to us? You believe in a spirit or a soul. What do you think that is? It lives inside of your flesh, but only your flesh can interact with the world. Only your flesh can speak and eat and fight and fuck and reproduce. And ultimately, the soul must obey the impulses of the flesh. What, then, is the soul but a prisoner of your flesh, an undying yet constrained energy, bound and enslaved within a shuffling, steadily rotting suit of tissue and savage needs. By virtue of your birth, you make a prisoner of a soul, an enslavement that multiplies as you multiply, breeding with grunts and stench and the spilling of squirming fluids. You recoil in horror at the idea of the parasites, these creatures who against your will can commandeer your sensory interaction with the world, imprisoning your mind behind a repulsive monstrosity that can command your limbs and even your very thoughts, poisoning every aspect of your being with its own alien desires until it becomes impossible to distinguish your own personality from the urges of the squirming thing living invisibly inside your body, until nothing that is truly you remains. Now you understand. For us, man is the parasite. Somehow, I could feel their hate, an energy that was too big and too cold to get the scope of it. The way that from the ground, the curvature of the earth just looks like a straight line. The shadow people moved in, so slowly. A dark tide creeping in on an island of mud and grass maybe 10 feet in diameter and shrinking. All those glowing eyes, little pinpricks of light floating on dark, featureless faces. John said, "Dave, do it. Dave, now." Do what? Focus. Focus on the most powerful thing you can imagine and squeeze that trigger. But that wasn't right. A nuclear explosion would not work here. Fire would not work. Violence would not work. That was the energy they were made of. Shadows aren't repelled by the dark, they're repelled by the light. The shadow man, my shadow man, floated right up to me, right up to Amy. I found myself shrieking, "No, no, no," in short, barking bursts, a single word over and over again. Amy's outstretched arms were beside me, and the shadow man was on her now, drifting right into her left hand. My stomach turned as I watched her hand dissolve and vanish completely. All that was left was a stump. Her left hand gone forever. But no, that must have been the confusion of the moment, because of course her left hand had always been gone. The accident and all that. I raised the fur gun, pointing it right at the chest of the shadow man. It was in his chest. My mind was blank. I reached out and grabbed Amy's other frozen hand and squeezed. I closed my eyes. I need to think like Amy. In that 1 second before I squeezed the trigger, a face popped into my head. The face was the same one that would have come to probably 75% of Americans if put in the same situation. A bearded face that was surely from the imagination of some long-lost Italian painter. A face that looked nothing like a Middle Eastern Jew. I suddenly remembered 24 horrible kid shows my adoptive parents made me watch on VHS, where in the final scene the main character always turned toward the camera and said with some variation of, "I know how we'll solve this problem. With Christianity." Well, their programming worked. When terror drove everything out of my mind, I fell back on the iconic face, and all I could picture in my head was that painting. That shitty velvet Elvis-y Jesus that had hung on my wall, that was still sitting in the trunk of John's caddy for all I knew. I squeezed the trigger. A flash of white light poured forth from the device in my hand. The whiteness condensed down to a shape. Small. Square. Suddenly, hovering there before us in midair, was that stupid painting. The painting swiveled, facing the dark hordes. The eyes on the face of Velvet Jesus burned with white fire. The mouth opened and let loose an inhuman roar. Velvet Jesus faced a shadow man to my left. Laser beams fired from his eyes. The shadow man exploded. The eyes lit up again and fired. Another shadow man left the world. The painting turned in midair. We hit the dirt. Beams of white fired left then right, clearing swathes through the shadows, piercing the blackness with a glare that was somehow equally terrible. A white blue light that I knew would leave me blind if I looked too long. The terrible light chewed through the shadows with a sickening, righteous energy that genuinely made me pity them. I suddenly knew how the scientists of the Manhattan Project felt the first time they saw a nuclear detonation, witnessing the power of what they had unleashed. The reflection of the light off of the surrounding sand bright enough to blind a man wearing dark glasses. Power so astonishing that it became hideous. And then there was only one shadow man left. My shadow man. The one in front of me that had taken Amy's hand, or made it so that her hand was already gone. Velvet Jesus flew toward the shadow man, then circled behind him. The painting screeched like an animal, and the mouth on the painting opened wide. The painting launched itself at the shadow man. Velvet Jesus bit his head off. The shadow man's body evaporated like a cloud of car exhaust. Then there was a flash, so bright that I couldn't close my eyes to it because they were already closed. But the brightness penetrated to the back of my eyeballs, burning all through me. There was a thud in the ground, a shockwave that sent a ripple through reality. The painting disappeared. The fur gun exploded in a miniature supernova of blue light. I don't know how I ended up flat on my back, but I was staring up at the still, gray clouds and trying to blink spots out of my eyes. All was silent. John appeared over me and said, "When they write the sequel to the Bible, that shit is definitely going to be in there." My ears were ringing. Somehow, all of my senses were ringing. Overload. Then John was pulling me to my feet and saying, Look at that one's face." He was pointing to one of the still life infected Reaper men, one I didn't even know had been standing there when the world froze. It had been in the process of rounding the burning truck, running toward us. It would have reached Amy in about 3 seconds if John had not called his soy sauce timeout. I walked over to the infected spaceman. His eyes were a pair of road flares, sizzling and crackling and smoldering with white light. The parasites were burning. All of the parasites were burning, at least the ones around us. The white, crackling pinpricks of light were twinkling from the infected spacemen. The sizzle of the frying spiders, filling the preternatural silence in that still world. And then the lights blinked out, one by one, the sizzling of the flesh fading as the last of the parasites in the field died. The men they had lived in would not suddenly wake up and find themselves cured. Happy endings like that never happened in Undisclosed. When time sped up, they would collapse, dead, but they would be free, and they would be no threat to us.